Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up.
It's about seeking truth. It's about speaking truth. It's about keeping it real. That's what we do at Truth Seeker Nation. We keep it 100. Real talk all the time. Let's get it.
What's going on, everyone? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Truth Seeker Nation podcast. My name is Tawana, and I am your host. I decided to stick with the theme that I've been talking about over the last couple weeks. We went back to childhood. I took us back to childhood, and we talked about a couple of different scenarios that we could all most likely relate to, especially if we grew up with siblings. Certain beliefs and principles, ideas about fairness that we would have knowledge about because of these interactions with our siblings. So even if not siblings, with our friends, our cousins, whomever, just when we were growing up, okay? Today, I have a few more childhood lessons that I'd like to talk about. It's going to be kind of a little different, but it's going to be a few of them. And I'm going to bring all of this together with this idea of being governed by other people. Thinking about your parents as the authority figure in the home when you were children, that would mean that all of your siblings would understand who is in control. But as is human tendency, sometimes siblings try to boss one another around, right? Tell one another what to do. What happens when that happens? Most of the time, the sibling that is being bossed around will say something like this to the other: "You're not my mom. You can't tell me what to do." Because they recognize that they are all on the same level. Even the younger ones will often feel this way towards siblings that are much older. Generally, the only time the younger children will submit to the older ones is if the parents leave the older siblings in charge and say, "Hey, you got to listen to them because I'm leaving so and so in charge." But even still, if the parents are gone and away from the house, even with that older child in the authoritative role, sometimes it's still going to be a challenge with the other siblings because they know that that older sibling is not the parents. And when your parents transfer that authority to the older sibling, they actually have the right to do that because it was their authority. They have the right to transfer the authority because it's their authority to transfer. But when we think about the position that we are in as adults, we leave our parents' home, we become self governing, we become autonomous. So that means that we then have authority over ourselves at that point. And because we have authority over ourselves, we would be the only ones who could give that authority away. Our parents could no longer put anyone in authority over us and transfer that authority because they no longer would have the authority. Giving that authority away is what is meant to consent to be governed by other people. Now, saying that made me think about something. So I'm going to go off on a bit of a side note here. In reality, this is how it should be. We should have had the opportunity as adults to consent to this arrangement of being governed by other people. Because after all, this is somewhat of a contract, don't you think? It's something that we would need to agree to. Just like when you go and work at a job, when you fill out the onboarding paperwork and go through the training, you are consenting to, in a sense, be governed by the rules and regulations of that company in exchange for them providing you with the paycheck. Okay. But in this system, it has been established in a very crafty way. Our parents, who would have had the authority over us as children unknowingly would have transferred a measure of that authority to the government the moment they signed our birth certificates or the moment our birth certificates were created, which means we were, in a sense, trapped. Because although this government, in their Declaration of Independence, claims that governing is only possible as a result of consent of the governed, we never got this opportunity to transfer this authority ourselves. And there would not have even been full disclosure. Another very important criteria that's supposed to occur when a contract is entered into, right? Because our parents wouldn't have known that the birth certificate signs over this authority, just like we're not informed of that in our day. It's given to us and it's presented as if it's a necessary step to having a child, which makes it appear mandatory, especially considering the fact that the birth certificate is tied to many things that we do when we're moving in this space in order to operate in this system, up to the point when we get our driver's license. Then a lot of times we don't need it, only for certain things at that point. But why would anybody think that this is not mandatory? So just thinking about that, does this sound like an honest or transparent arrangement? Or does it sound more like entrapment? I'll just leave that question lingering, but let's take it back to the story. So, when we were children, we recognized when we were all on the same level. As brothers and sisters, none of us could tell one another what to do. We could try, but it wouldn't necessarily go over well because unless mom and dad, the actual authority figure, transferred the authority, we don't have to listen to our siblings. And this is something that's so easy to see because even as adults, we know that no other adult have the authority over us, being that we're all on the same level, the same way we were with our siblings, all on the same level. We are all on the same level with other adults. So they don't have authority over us. They can't tell us what to do. And if they tried, we'd probably look at them crazy or use some choice words, right? But we definitely wouldn't do it unless we were under certain circumstances, like working at a job, as I mentioned. When it comes to this government, these people that are in this position of governing us, we need to be able to see them this way as well, just like our siblings. We're all on the same level. Unlike it was with our parents when we were children, the authority that these people have is not constant. It only applies in certain situations, which means technically they really don't have authority unless we think they do. Now, saying that actually reminded me of this show that I saw on Netflix, okay? And it was about this federal agency that was rounding up some people that they considered criminals. And there was one man that lived on this reservation, like a Native American reservation. So this federal agent, this lady, was going to go try to present this warrant that she had. And when she was driving to or on the property, there was a lady, a Native American lady, that was kind of watching over the place. And you could just see in her stance, in her facial expression, that she was not moved by this federal agent that was about to pull up. Like she was looking like, what the fuck is she doing here? She just was really, she just had this powerful stance. Like it did not phase her, right? And the federal agent comes out all official with her badge and, presenting who she was. And she got the paper and this is the warrant. She's asking for the guy. And the Native American lady says, well, there's only one road into town. And if you came down that road, which you would have had to get here, you would have saw the sign that says, this is sovereign land, which means that warrant, that piece of paper that you're holding, is nothing more than a piece of paper. Yeah, that was funny. For two reasons. First, because the government is the one who would make the land sovereign, which they don't even own the land, but somehow it's thought that they do. Okay. But the fact that they would make the land and not the people sovereign is just crazy. But the other part that was funny was how unmoved the Native American lady was. Like she was just her demeanor, I just loved it because it was just like she didn't this lady looked just like a lady to her. Like with and she didn't have any authority there. That's exactly how we need to be, right? But she didn't have any, I mean, she seen that that lady didn't have any authority. The paper, even though it was so official and in other situations it would actually work, right? People would be handed a warrant and then they would be, oh, they have a warrant, they can go through the house and whatever, right? It's crazy. This is so uh it's so clear that this is just an illusion because of situations like that this authority only applies in certain settings. Even the federal agent knew she didn't really have authority in that situation, which is why she just turned around and walked away. She didn't try to force the lady to, bring the guy out. It's funny. But anyway, this one is a topic that I can continue talking about. So let me go ahead and move on to the next one. You go and you visit your friends or your cousin's house, and they're telling you about something crazy that they heard about or that they did. And when you get home, you ask your parents permission to be able to do it. Or better yet, you've already tried something that you saw one of your friends do, right? And your parents are addressing you about it. What is it that your parents would likely have told you? That you don't got to do something just because somebody else does it. If your friend jumps off a bridge, are you going to jump off a bridge too? Something like that. Okay. Most of us probably remember hearing a simple principle like that you don't got to be a follower, basically. You don't got to do what everybody else does. This is something we all know in our spirit. We know this. And our parents know this. That's why they taught us this. But for some reason, the way we move in this world, most people are doing exactly that, following what everybody else is doing and not asking enough questions or not asking the right questions, not challenging the beliefs, not questioning whether what we're doing even makes sense or whether it's what we should be doing, but just simply following. This is a mindset that we need to get out of. We need to think about this basic truth that we most likely learned as a child and bring it back to the forefront of our minds. Awaken to this realization that you do not have to do something because everybody else does it. And that example that your parents would have used about jumping off a bridge just because your friend jumped off a bridge, it's a very good example to think about because if something is detrimental, you're not going to go and just follow behind them just because they did it. But what about our situation? The situation that we now find ourselves in. Is it detrimental? In order to be able to perceive the answer to this question, we have to take a step back and look at everything that is going on. And remember that all of these beliefs about what we're supposed to be doing has been given to us, has been handed down, and everybody around us has had them handed down and are pretty much all doing the same things. Just because the adults in our lives when we were younger were doing certain things and teaching certain things doesn't mean that what they were doing and teaching was correct. Remember, they too were taught by their parents. This is generational, generation after generation. This continues, they continue to teach and pass down beliefs, which is perpetuating our situation. And the problem is that a lot of people as adults still buy into all of what they were taught. People will argue with you about beliefs they were taught by someone as a child. I mean, well, when they were children, they were taught this by adults. But they never did the research really to come up with that, or in some cases to confirm whether it's true. They were just taught that. And I'm going to give you one example because we're going to talk about this at some point: the Bible. Many people were taught to believe that the Bible is God's word, right? But how many of those same people have really done extensive research on that? But they will argue with you. They will tell you that you are out of pocket if you don't believe. Why are you questioning God, is what they say, right? So that's what I'm talking about. A lot of these beliefs are so firmly ingrained in people and they are not questioning them. And when it comes to self-government, if you were to speak about this to people, most of them will probably look at you crazy for even thinking this is something to talk about or something we could possibly do. Most people will probably try to steer you away from this idea because of fear, because they're so accustomed to doing what everybody else is doing, because they don't know what they're talking about. Okay. And they've been conditioned to believe that this is necessary, that being governed by other people is necessary. But just because they believe that doesn't make it so. Okay, let's now move on to the last childhood lesson. Most of us can remember this little saying we were taught as children that was meant for our protection. And it was, do not talk to strangers. Or maybe let's be a little broader with it. Ultimately, to beware of strangers, because you never know what somebody's intention is. And if your parents didn't authorize you to be around that person, you don't just go to anybody, just anybody. Okay. And this is actually a good principle for us to continue to live by to an extent, even as adults. This is still beneficial for us to consider when it comes to this situation we find ourselves in, because we all know that in order to know where someone is coming from, you have to be around that person, or you have to talk to them. You have to get a feel for their energy or hear their perspectives. If you don't know someone, that means you don't know what type of things they'll do. You don't know how their mind works, whether or not you can trust them or if they're a good person, right? You don't know anything until you get to know certain things about the individual. And even sometimes you still don't know somebody until you're around them enough, right? And the reason why I'm bringing this up, as adults, going through this system, especially the school system, we have been conditioned to almost unquestioningly trust the government. Just feel like it's this good entity that has our best interests at heart, almost like it can do no wrong. Now, I know there are systems and programs that are built into the government that are meant to help people. It makes it seem like they do have our best interests at heart. But just having those type of systems and programs in place to help people is not all that it would take to show this, because they are in the position of governing all of society. So it makes sense that they would have those type of things in place. They have to think of all of the ways to govern society. So you would need that. They would need that, excuse me. But that really doesn't say much. But when we say anything potentially negative about the government, maybe them having some type of an agenda or something like that, people will defend, right? They'll say, "Ah, nah, the government wouldn't do anything like that. The government wouldn't do that to people." But we all know the government is run by people. It is not some mindless machine with a built in code to do what's right. It is run by people. And for the most part, all of the people in there are strangers to you. But I realize that a lot of people may know someone that works in the government, that works for the city, works for the state, or even the federal government. And because of this simple fact, it's hard to wrap their mind around the idea of the government having a negative intent or being a negative presence, right? People just think about those whom they know and they're thinking, but they're good people. Why would they do anything like that? Okay, let's get one thing straight before I continue. For the most part, the people that are alive now didn't really influence the type of government we actually have because it was already in place long before we even got here. But if it's difficult to imagine this government being detrimental or having any negative intentions because there's good people that work there, let's do this. How about we don't think about this present time? Let's go back to our grandparents' time and before. Let's say 125 to 200 years ago. Who were those people? Those strangers. Do you know? Do you know if any of them had negative intentions? Whether they were trying to usurp this newly formed government and insert certain ideas into it in order for their agenda to be realized? Do you know if anyone had intentions of, let's say, controlling the masses, gaining power, or becoming wealthy? Now, I'm not saying you need to go and do all this research and find all of that out. We will discuss some of these topics in future episodes. But the point I'm making, there were some key figures that influenced the government before you and I were even born, before our grandparents were even born. People that changed the direction, that significantly changed a lot of what was initially supposed to happen with this government. So, even if you believe in the Constitution, this original document written by these so called founding fathers, you have to remember that this was written approximately 250 years ago. And just like the game of telephone, which is something I'm sure we also all remember, what happens? Somebody says something, but then it goes down the line. And by the time it gets to the end, it's completely unrecognizable from the thing that was initially said. So, yes, we can read the document and we can see what it was supposed to be. But there has been a lot that has happened since then that made it become something else. When you allow people to govern you, to govern your life, to govern your children's lives, you don't necessarily know what you're getting because you can't be sure whether those individuals really have your best interests at heart. Something can look promising or positive on the outside, but unless you know what the intention of those who created it was, you can't always be so sure. It's like the saying goes, all that glitters is not gold. So even if there are good people that work in the government now, which we know there are, we have to understand that some of the influences from the past are built into the government. The setup was already in place. The way it operates was already in motion. So these good people are just falling in line, doing their jobs, and are none the wiser about what is going on. If the structure itself was not meant for our benefit, or there were things that were built in that were meant to be detrimental, then those of us who are alive now, who are perpetuating this, are in a position of moving forward the agendas of these people from the past. But this is what happens when we hand authority over to others. Of course, we didn't do this willingly, but regardless, we are in a position where we are now able and should begin to see this clearly. We're in a time where we have a responsibility to look at this and make the necessary changes, do what needs to be done. Realize that there is no one in a better position to govern your life than you. You would be looking out for your own best interests, right? You would be looking out for the best interest of your children as well. You don't know what these other people have, or these people from the past, what they had in mind for you and your children. It's time to take back what is rightfully yours. You don't owe these people anything, these strangers. You do not have to hand over authority over your own life. That is all I have for you today. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Next week, I'm going to be shifting gears and we're going to start talking about some different topics. But because everything is intertwined, we will definitely revisit some of these thoughts, or they will be kind of mixed into, some of the conversations. But I hope that you enjoy your week, and I look forward to talking with you again soon.
It's about seeking truth. It's about speaking truth. It's about keeping it real. That's what we do at Truth Seeker Nation. We keep it 100. Real talk all the time. Let's get it.